If you'll be hosting Christmas or Hanukkah this year, or both, or any other time you have friends or family gathering, why not make these cute little cutlery pockets? Instead of just having a plain plate with your silverware and napkins on the sides, and you can either put 3 silverware pieces or all 4. You can put the salad knife, regular fork, knife, and spoon in this pocket, or it looks just as good with just the 3 basics. So before you get your plates out of the cabinet, head to your sewing machine and let's whip up some of these cutlery pockets. So we're going to start where we always start, with our supplies. You're going to need the basics: cutting mat, rotary cutter, ruler, ironing board, sewing machine. I also recommend a quilter's clapper. I'll show you how those work. They are one of my favorite tools. And then you're going to need 4 pieces of fabric to make this cute cutlery holder or cutlery pocket, whatever you want to call it. For these pieces, you're going to need 2 pieces that are 5 inches by 10 inches. That is going to be the inside and the back. Then you need 1 piece that is 5 inches by 7.5 inches. That is going to be the front of the pocket. And then the accent piece, I'm going to have you cut 5.5 inches by 8 inches. Now we will be trimming so that it is 5 inches, but I found using 2 5-inch pieces and sewing them on this curve and then pressing them to get this nice, consistent accent piece was sometimes difficult. So way easier to just start with a piece of fabric that is a 1/2 inch wider and trim it. And I am all about everything being a little bit easier. The other thing that you will need is just a medium weight fusible interfacing. Okay, so let's look at the finished one to talk about the fabric. So you have this fabric, I call this the inside fabric, the front pocket, the accent, and then obviously the back of the holder. This one I tried without anything. It's just fabric. It has no interfacing or anything, and I don't love it. It's a little bit too floppy. I prefer this one that I made where I put the interfacing in one of these back pieces. And if you want it even firmer, you could also add it to one of the pocket pieces. I didn't. I just used it on the one, but I do like that it holds its shape a lot better. I like to have a thread that matches my front pocket because I do recommend sewing a little stitch line right along there. It just helps it stay finished. Now let's talk about all of the color options and things to consider. So this one I obviously did with a darker on the bottom, much lighter. So I just kind of continued the Star of Bethlehem up here. And then you want your accent fabric to be different enough that it's going to show, right? You want it to accent everything. And then I use the same fabric as the accent fabric on the back. You can do all kinds of things. So the one we're going to do today, this is going to be the inside. This is going to be the accent fabric. And then this is going to be the pocket fabric. And I'm going to show you how to cut that. Both sort of dark with a brighter accent. And then I'm just going to use the same fabric on the back. Here's some other ways that can go. So the first step is to make our pocket. And to make our pocket, we're going to cut the front. So the piece that is 7.5 inches by 5.5 inches, we're going to cut the angle. So you're going to start at the top corner and then 1.5 inches down, and you can decide which direction you want these to angle. So I like mine angled this way. If you want to do them this way, that's totally fine. You would just start at this corner and cut down that way instead of this corner to cut down this way. Do them consistent so that everything at your table is facing the same way. So just line your fabric up on your cutting mat, put your ruler at that corner, and then twist it until it is at that 1.5 inches down from this corner, and trim. And I always cut with the fabric facing up, because if you do some facing up and some facing down, you're going to have them angled in different ways. So just be consistent in whichever way you do that. To make our pocket, we make sure everything has the direction the same. We're going to put them right sides together. We're going to center this on the accent piece, and we're going to line up this top point with the top edge. You want the extra fabric to be at the bottom. You don't want this fully centered. You need this lined up at the top. Super, super important. I'm just going to put 2 pins in there. And then you're just going to sew 1/4 inch from this angle. So just sew straight down there, and then we will come back here and do some trimming and some pressing. Our next step is to trim this angle, and then we are going to press the pocket and trim. So I'm just going to line this right up along the edge of the front pocket fabric, which is the green, and cut the angle off of the rectangle. Now we're going to use our clapper, and if you're not familiar, this is a unfinished piece of hardwood. It's usually maple or oak, very comfortable little section here, and what it's going to do is when we have pressed the seam or flipped anything, you then press down with this. It helps absorb some of the heat and really flatten that fabric to get it nice and crisp. The first thing we'll be doing is setting the seam, which basically means heating the seam just the same way it came out of the sewing machine. So you're not flipping it or doing anything, hitting it with the clapper. It flattens any little ripple you might have in your fabrics. It gets any air space that might be in that thread. And it might sound a little silly at first, but it really does make a difference. This little step makes a big difference. Now, I'm going to flip this forward and I'm going to press this seam, hit that with the clapper. Now it is time to magically make our little accent part. So for this, we are going to take the front fabric and we're going to match the bottom edges of the front and the back. Then just kind of push gently up and finger press and make sure this is an even accent piece. It's kind of hard to see. So we've matched this edge, matched this side. Sometimes it might be over a little bit. It's not always exactly matched. The main thing you want to focus on is matching this bottom edge and then making sure this is even. So that is nice and even. And now I'm going to press. One thing I love about these Christopher Thompson cutting mats from Riley Blake Designs, they're nice and thick, but they're also white on the one side, which we've been using, and black on the other side. So look at that. Now you can actually see really well what I am doing. So I'm just going to line this up, and now we're just going to be trimming that accent fabric to be the same width, which is 5 inches, as the green. So now we have our pocket. Now I'm going to just quickly run to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew about 1/8 of an inch from this seam line straight across there. I think it gives it a nice finished look, and it's also going to hold this fold in place if you ever put this through the washing machine. Because I'm going to be starting off the edge of the fabric, I'm going to use this leader fabric. And what that does is it allows you to start sewing, and if there's any kind of knot or bird's nest from the bobbin, it will be on this piece of scrap fabric and not on your project. Then when I get to my project, I need to make sure I take a few stitches backwards. And then what you can do with these leader fabrics is you can turn it into an ender fabric. So if you don't want to have to do that step again the next time you start, you can just take the same scrap of fabric and sew onto it. I usually do it on the corners if I'm turning it into an ender fabric, and just leave it there until you're sewing again. Okay, our front pocket is ready. We have that nice stitch line. This is beautifully even. So now it is time to organize the pieces. So you're going to take your inside fabric and put that face up. I'm going to put the sample so you know which one I'm talking about. So this is the inside, which is the equivalent of this one. So we want that face up. Then we're going to put the pocket face up also, lining up these sides and the bottom edge. So this is what our cutlery pocket is going to look like when it's done. Then I'm going to take the backing fabric. I'm going to put that right sides together on top of the other two pieces, and I'm going to throw some clips around it. Now, just like I mentioned with the pocket, make sure if you have any directional fabric, you have it going in the correct direction. You can make holiday pockets, 4th of July pockets, everyday pockets. Let me know in the comments what you think you would use this for. Would you make these for a more special occasion dinner, or do you just like having interesting things on your table when you're having company? I'd love to know. Okay, so now I'm going to sew down the long side across the bottom and up the other side. I'm going to leave the entire top open. Now we don't have to do the leader fabric because we kept it there basically. I'm going to put the foot down and we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I would also recommend that you use a jeans needle because this does get pretty thick, so it's going to work a little bit better for you. And in addition to the jeans needle, I would use a walking foot if you have that. I'm going to cut that ender off. And if you were making multiple at the same time, you could just continue on the next one and daisy chain these together. Our next step is to clip the corners. So we want to make these as square as possible. So I like to do 2 cuts, especially since there is so much fabric. So I come down at a much larger angle than if you went straight across, and then do the other side. Make sure you leave a little bit of fabric beyond that stitch line, and definitely do not cut your stitches. Now we're going to turn this right side out. Now, depending on how you turn it, I'm going to show you this because this happened to me once and I panicked. So it is possible to turn it so you think you put your pocket on wrong, even though you saw me do it correctly, right? So you're like, oh no, we have the same fabric matching. What on earth did I do wrong? You just turned it inside out wrong. So you're just going to do this and flip it and it will be correct. You can do a big sigh of relief like I did. So I try and push that out as much as I can with my fingers. Then I grab a turning tool and I'm going to very gently push that corner out. You don't want to do it hard and fast or you could end up breaking your stitches. Lately, I have been doing this turning the edge before I turn things right side out, but I forgot to do that this time, so I won't. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push these out. I'm going to press all the way around, just making sure that those seams are all the way out, that you're not seeing the backing on the front, getting everything nice and flat. Now we're going to turn the top edge under about a 1/4 inch and press. And I always start at the seam lines and then get the fabric to match. So you can do it before or after you turn it right side out. I seem to waver. Sometimes I do it now because I forgot to do it the other way. Sometimes I do it on purpose, but either way it works. Let me know in the comments which you prefer. Do you like to turn those flaps down like that before you turn things inside out so you can really see how much you're turning down? Or do you prefer to do it from this side where it's the finished product and you can just see that edge? Okay, I put 2 clips on there. We're almost done. Thankfully, this is a pretty quick project because you always need more than one, right? Now you have a choice to make in regards to finishing and top stitching. You know, you definitely have to stitch across the top because we need to close the hole that we used for turning. On this one, I sewed all the way around. And then I decided I didn't like that as much, but it's totally a personal preference. When you sew all the way around, you're either going to be changing your thread if you don't want the thread to show up. So if I wanted this to be cream and I still wanted to sew all the way around, I would be sewing this part in navy and then changing and doing this part in cream. I didn't do that. I just did navy all the way around and I used a bobbin thread to match the back. Now for my Hanukkah ones, I did it a little bit differently, and this is how I'm going to do this one. I just sewed from basically the top of the pocket to the top of the pocket. So I sewed from here, up, across, and down. I feel like this is just a more sophisticated look where it's not pressed down and sewn along there than this one. Just like it better. And then always matching the bobbin to the back fabric. So for this one, we're going to be putting navy in the top and cream in the bottom. Now, because we aren't starting off of the edge of the fabric and we're actually starting right here, we can't use the leader fabric. So instead, I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread. And if you haven't seen that before, here's how you do it. You're going to hold that top thread. You're going to get to where you want to start. Put your foot down. Put your needle down, still holding the thread. Pull your needle up, give it a little tug, and your bobbin thread will now be poking out. I always keep tweezers by my sewing machine so I can pull that. I can also use them to help push the thread under. You can use your fingers, but then you end up impaling your finger a lot more with the needle. So the tweezers is just a much easier way to go. Now, still holding both the bobbin and the top thread, take a few stitches and then go backwards a few stitches. And then I always go a few more stitches before I let go of that thread. And then I'm going to stop sewing just before I hit that accent fabric because we don't want to sew the pocket closed, and just go back a few stitches. So now you can see there's no bird's nest back here. I just have to trim these little end threads over there. And it is all done. One thing I love about it is it works great with 3 pieces of silverware, just your basic fork, spoon, knife. But if you just push them a little bit closer together, you can also add that salad or dessert fork in there too. So depending on the meal that you're going to be serving, it's going to work for both.